now time to take a look for Global Business Update. Michael Wilson Joseph from Cape Town, South Africa. Great to have you, Michael. How are you? Morning.
Good morning. Yes, Asia Pacific. There is this slight feeling now that given the chairman of the Fed didn't say a great deal yesterday about the direction of interest rates and wasn't really expected to. However, Asia markets have taken it upon themselves to assume a Fed trajectory after 7 interest rate rises in 2022 of a slightly shallower rise in interest rates in 2023. Nikkei's up about 1%, China up marginally. South Korea is hitting back at claims, particularly from China, that their COVID entrance rules are discriminatory. They're saying that half of their imported cases of COVID are from China, and it's gone up 14 times since November. Policies are also, though, against people coming in from what they describe as all Korean and non-Korean nationals. So it's not just travellers from China who are being asked to provide negative COVID tests. The World Bank, a big cut to its 2023 growth outlook. It's gone from 3 to 1.7%. Just some of the major economies that may interest you. The United States, they feel their original target for GDP growth was 2.4% in 2023. Now it's 0.5%, and the EU 1.5% was their original target, now down to 0.1% for 2023. I'm going to bracket the IMF in with the World Bank. This is some breaking news. The IMF has refused to appear before a UK cross-party committee to discuss its comments on that Truss Kwarteng mini budget, which it criticised so dramatically. The chairperson of that has actually been asking the IMF to come forward and give some of their reasoning. So far, they've refused to do it. As far as the United States is concerned, stock futures, very little changed today. NASDAQ, its third winning day of the new trading year. There's a feeling that a lower dollar also is about to break its way into the world, which will mean that emerging economies become investable again. As I say, Jay Powell didn't say a great deal. He was talking to the Swedish bank Riksbank yesterday, and all he said was, as you'd expect him to say, and I quote, "Price stability is the bedrock of a healthy economy." So, in other words, no clues about where interest rates are actually headed, but just a reiteration of his general position there. The Republican-led House, the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, as his first bit of legislation is going to be bipartisan. It's being seen as a bit of a triumph, given the way there's been a lot of political infighting in the United States. And this is directed against further Chinese influence as far as imports are concerned into the country. And if you remember, I was telling you yesterday that Dell is one of the companies that is now saying that it will abandon its China originated chips and start to use chips which are made in the United States. Elon Musk has hit the record books for something he won't particularly be very happy about. His record 182 billion lack of or reduction in personal wealth is dwarfing the previous one, which is in 2000, which was a Japanese gentleman who lost $58.6 billion. But Elon Musk has lost $182 billion, and even the Guinness Book of Records is now saying it is actually very difficult to understand exactly how much it is because of various complications within the private company itself. Coinbase, 20% cut in the workforce. Coinbase, as you probably know, is a crypto exchange. They're cutting 930 out of 4,700 globally. They already cut 18% in September, and it won't have escaped your attention. I was talking about it yesterday. Goldman are more or less confirming that they're going to lay off about 3,000 people, but because of things getting worse in the coming year. However, I would also draw your attention to the bank's big bank reporting season coming up, starting on Friday, and we'll see how the banks expect to deal with higher interest rates then. They've obviously been able to charge more for their loans, but not paid depositors as much. That's where they've been making their money. That may change. EU, now now, here's a good one for you. This is the land of La Lunch. This is France, and he's raised the. Macron was originally wanting to raise the retirement age to 65. He's since pulled back on that. Now it's 64. He wants to bring that in by 2030. The unions are naturally saying that this is appalling and they won't stand for it. And France now spends 14% of its GDP on pensions. That's above the EU average, which is about 12%. So many battles ahead as far as France is concerned. To the UK, and it won't surprise you to learn that the Treasury is thinking about, it was taking further down the line its discussions about a digital pound cryptocurrency, part of its commitment to become a world crypto hub. Remember, this is not Bitcoin. This is something which is actually called a stable coin, and it will be backed by other currencies or gold. So it doesn't really get into the Bitcoin arena at the moment, but it's certainly something which the UK Treasury, Bank of England, and other central banks are considering around the world. UK, Amazon has laid off 1,200 jobs as it's closing 3 warehouses, or plans to close 3 warehouses in the UK. Goes very much along with 18,000 jobs going from Amazon globally, which I brought to your attention last week. The UK, I'm going to talk about British Volt. Now, this is an important one. This is a gigafactory which is based in the north of England, in Northumberland. It's not attracting government investment until it gets some investment of its own. It's currently in talks with an Indonesian connected but UK-based investment fund for £160 million. As soon as it gets that, then it will start to get more money and it will start to enter the race for providing batteries. And some breaking news from the UK just before I hit the oil price. UK's Twitter department, now it's been hit with legal challenge from UK staff. 43 of its 180 staffers are protesting about the way in which they were laid off from Twitter. And remember, the reason I mention this is because this is part of a global scene. It's facing 200 legal complaints in the US and 4 class action lawsuits. And finally, oil, slightly better overnight, given that it's expected that global demand will increase. China will probably increase as well. And also a belief that OPEC Plus, when it meets this month, will do whatever it can to support the oil price. That is the global view this morning.
All right, real quickly. At first, I would like to bring to your notice what is happening in the UK as regards His Majesty's revenues, saying that there have been some revenue shortfalls on taxation and they've not collected about £42 billion sterling in taxation that is just left like that because of the processes of collecting tax money in the UK. What would you like to say about that? Number 2 will be about what is happening, this wave of job losses worldwide, from the banks to Amazon and everything, recession breathing down, and also what is happening in France. Do you think Macron stands a chance, or will the unions, be ready for another Gilets jaunes-esque, if I may use that word, protests on the streets of France, because they're not buying this, increasing retirement rate, and also, he's sweetened up the deal a little bit. He's put about It's raised the benchmark retirement pension rate monthly from about 900 to about 1,200 euros, but they are still not buying this, and all of this happening at the same time.
I think Macron will have a very, very tough job indeed. As you rightly observe, it was going to be 65. Now it's down to 64, the retirement age, and they spend a huge amount, 14%, well above the EU average on their state pensions. This is the country that brought us the get out of the factory and go for a lunch break in the late 19th century. I mean that's what it was all about then, and this is something which is not going to be broken. The French for can't be bothered, I mean, is something that you'll find a lot of people trying to work out, as they can't raise anybody at the weekends, they can't raise anybody over the lunch hour to work. This is a country which is used to fat pensions, well supplied by the tax take, and Macron will have his work cut out completely to do that. I think there will be considerable battles ahead. As far as world layoffs are concerned, yes, I mean, I would point you towards Amazon. I point you towards Amazon in the UK, point you towards other countries, Goldman Sachs as well. I mean, what we appear to be facing in 2023 is a global recession, and because consumers are expected to spend less and therefore investment banking will suffer and consumer banking will also suffer as well as a result of this recession. This is what the layoffs are all about. I mean, we can count them up, but I suspect we won't really know where 2023 is headed until we more or less say goodbye to it, which often happens, doesn't it, in these economic times.
All right, let me stay in the UK first before moving on to China. So I thought you would give us some updates on Prince Harry's sale of the book Spare. According to reports, according to The Guardian, it says that it's the fastest selling book in the UK, selling 40,000 copies already, and I would imagine obviously people's interest in wanting to read the details of his memoirs, and also of course the responses by the British media, which has been largely quiet, but a few people have spoken out around the world. It'd be good to get your take on that. And then of course in China, going to China, beyond the COVID restrictions dealing with South Korea and in retaliatory restrictions, also the fact that they're saying that the population is at one of its lowest for decades, as there have been more deaths and less births, and of course the impact on the economy, on the China economy. What's your view on this?
400,000 books actually is what is being quoted for the Harry memoir. You won't find a copy of that in the Wilson household, and I think we've probably had enough. But it is selling very fast indeed. The fastest non-fiction book sales. It's dwarfed by Harry Potter, the most recent Harry Potter, which was in. As it was sold, but that's fiction. We're talking about non-fiction. Yes, I mean, it depends where you go. I think I'm not exactly sure about these figures. They are being quoted quite widely, and yet I have a friend who is a royal correspondent who went to his local supermarket and found it discounted more than the 50% that it actually is being discounted at major suppliers like Waterstones. As far as the content's concerned, well, dream on. I mean, he's being seen by many people as the Ginger Whinger. And what people here, what people rather in the UK tend to think about royalty is never explain, never complain. End of story as far as that's concerned. I'm sure it's got it will continue to have a lot of media attention around the world. Again, you won't find a copy of it in my household. I'm not interested. As far as layoffs are concerned, and particularly as far as COVID is concerned, I'm not sure about the population of China reducing. I think the working population of China is actually reducing, and they are experiencing what most developing countries have to deal with these days, which is an increase in older people having to live off the state, having to live on pensions, and being supported by a diminishing working population. Some people are saying that the reason that anti-COVID is reducing the population there, and the lockdown did its work on that, is some kind of scheme by the Communist Party to reduce the population of China and to make it more affordable. I mean, you can take those conspiracy theories and run with them should you wish. All I can see is that I think countries around the world are trying to work out, one, whether there is a threat from imported COVID from China, and number two, that are probably heartened by the fact that both Moderna and Pfizer are saying that they are talking to China about vaccines, and they can start producing vaccines within China, should China so wish, within a few months. I think that's the way forward on that particular subject.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson, for bringing us the Global Business Update this morning. We'll now move on to the African Business Update, and we have Rota Sadiri with us to discuss. Good morning,
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. Going well. So we had a pretty, big day yesterday, budget day, Rise TV and KPMG, taking a look at Nigeria's 2023 budget, what it means for you as watching, as an individual, businesses, and the macroeconomy as a whole, as myself and Rolake Akinkube Filani that co-anchored this event with a number of executives from KPMG, representatives from the government. Let's take a look at some of the highlights.
It's a 21.8 trillion naira budget. It's significant because it's a transition year budget. What this means is that the administration that has put in place this budget is not the same administration that will be seeing it through to the end of the year. It's also significant because it's a deficit budget, an 11.3 trillion naira deficit. So our country, Nigeria, has a revenue problem. Now, when we drill down into the revenues, it's good to note that non-oil revenues exceed our oil revenues. This speaks to diversification, but on the other hand, it also speaks to some extent to the underperformance of the oil and gas sector.
When people looks at the budget, what's in it for me is think more holistically. So for instance, this budget plans to spend nearly 3 trillion on security. Is that for me and you? Yes, it is. Because some of us may live in parts of the country where the security threat is not that imminent, and so we do not appreciate the value of the cost of insecurity. But the expenditure to secure the country is for you and I, it's for everyone. The expenditure on healthcare is for everyone. I mean, you may not need it, you may not need public facilities, but there are people who do, including some of the staff who work for you.
The budget looks to me to be rather optimistic.
Okay.
Let me put it like that.
Yeah.
To expect revenue, last year, 2022, revenue increased by 1 trillion, from 6 trillion in 2021 to 7 trillion in 2022. 7 trillion is the peak revenue performance of this administration in 8 years, as a matter of Nigeria's peak revenue in history, in Naira terms. Not to mention the fact that if you correct that 7 trillion for devaluation, it's probably less, much less than the 4 trillion, 5 trillion that we were doing.
Oil demand has obviously tanked a bit, let's be serious. There's a global energy transition going on. How do you see global dynamics really increasing the sense of urgency around incentivizing the local business environment?
There needs to be a drive for productivity in this economy. We need to start finding ways to drive production, which means investment coming in and some form of mechanics to drive that. From our perspective at NESG, we've continually held dialogue with government about how they need to start seeing the drive for low interest rates as a mechanism for ensuring productive investment. Like you want investment in manufacturing. We talked about you need all of that, but in an interest rate environment that's high, that continues to get more and more difficult. And unless you address the inflation issue, right, you cannot address directly the interest rate issue. So government needs to focus radically on inflation as it is. Today we're talking about 21% inflation.
On behalf of the chairman of This Day Arise Group, Prince Nduka Obagbena, CON, I want to thank everybody who have made this possible. Budget Day 2023 is not going to be the last. There will be more budget days to come. The conversation we have started here, it will definitely continue, not ending with this program. We want to thank the DG, the Director General of the Budget Office, Dr. Ben Akabweze, for finding time to come and shed more light on the gray areas of Budget 2023. Of course, the conversation will continue. It will get more robust as implementation continues, because you have supplementary budgets just signed into law. Budget 2022 extended by 3 months, 2023 budget. So as you implement, it has to be effective. The conversation will get more robust. I'm sure Dr. Ben Akabweze will be ready at any point to shed more light. And I want to thank KPMG, Tola, Adeyemi, and all the eggheads at the KPMG Towers who are putting their brains to work for businesses, for clients, and for country.
All right, so yeah, so pretty, eventful day as far as that was concerned. So yeah, those were some of the highlights. And we'll be replaying a lot of what took place on the Global Business Report and throughout the day. On less optimistic news, back to, even though the budget itself wasn't very optimistic, but the global economic prospects, the World Bank just put this out yesterday. And, Nigeria, as far as Sub-Saharan Africa is concerned, you can look through the estimates and forecasts there. Optimistic for Sub-Saharan Africa, 3.4% growth is where, let me start from 2020. COVID, recession, everybody in that column there was the contraction. 2021, you see the rebound for Sub-Saharan Africa, commodity prices and so on. Estimates is 3.4, so there's a slowdown, war in Ukraine. Then you're seeing 3.6 for 2023, 3.9 for 2024. Nigeria, though, you can see a slowdown, 2.9%. They talked about the floods and how they impacted the agricultural sector last year. That is the World Bank. They talked about public finances, which was something that was heavily discussed at the Arise TV KPMG budget day yesterday in terms of how restricted our finances are due to subsidies. And so you can see that for 2023, we were forecast to slow down to 2.9 and 2024, 2.9. Even that 3.1 that the World Bank is estimating for us, maybe we touch, I don't know if we'll do 2.6, 2.7. I don't even know if we'll do 3.1, but we'll see how that works out. South Africa, you can see even worse than Nigeria. 6% contraction in 2020. They rebounded to 4.9. The mining sector was part of that rebound for South Africa. Hello, Nigeria and your mineral resources. But then, look at that, 1.9% growth 2022, 1.4% 2023, 1.8. Eskom, I saw an article that said that if you tied If electricity generation was the only metric that you use for economic growth in South Africa's economy has collapsed. Eskom, I heard they just poisoned the former CEO as he was leaving or something like that. Eskom is a corrupt mess, and it's South Africa is just, they are trying to rebound, but until they sort out Eskom, because South Africa Airways and their debt issues and a number of other things that are going on there. Angola, from the chart, you can see they rebounded thanks to higher oil prices, but they still got some issues as far as inflation is germane to everyone here. So inflationary pressure is still pretty high. Remember, the World Bank said inflation pushed 5 million Nigerians into poverty. I think that even overlapped with COVID, where COVID pushed, they said it was 7 million, but between COVID and inflation, you've got almost 7 million people falling. And with the government's plans to pull 100 million people out of poverty, that's just in the near term not going to happen. Now, for Nigeria, the next leadership that comes in, when whoever wins and is sworn in May, that president has a 30-day window with respect to what to do about fuel subsidies. So essentially, it's a deadline, a 30-day deadline on what to do with respect to the subsidy, because as we talked about on the budget day yesterday, the Arise TV KPMG budget day, subsidies are supposed to end in June of this year, and there's a budget allocation of 3.3 trillion. So this is how serious we will know, whoever becomes president, we will know how serious that person is, because they will either yank off or allow the subsidies to elapse, and then you will see the resulting impact on fuel prices, or because of what, you're just coming in. I don't know how, honestly, we're pretty divided now. I don't know, whoever wins probably won't have that much political capital, but the impact on price is going to be serious. So with respect to putting a cabinet together quickly, we'll know how serious this new president is if they allow the subsidies to go and then maybe move the funds around. And then President Buhari, I know he was talking within the context of him being clean. He said that he has no investments overseas. All his investments are here in Nigeria. And I thought from a portfolio allocation perspective, if you were to hold 100% Naira assets and not hold anything overseas, then your investment returns are going to take a big blow. So from a personal finance perspective, for anyone who saw or heard the president talk about how, I guess he's clean, doesn't hold any assets. He just got his farm in Darwa and that's it. You want to diversify, right? You want to hold securities overseas. You want to hold, all the foreign exchange and all these other assets to allow you to protect your purchasing power when inflation, as I just mentioned, hammers your naira earnings. So I just thought that was interesting. With the president saying he owns no Nigeria. He's like, all I own is in Nigeria. I don't own any foreign asset. That was very interesting.
That was interesting. But it just shows the stark reality here that inflation is even just cutting through your purchasing power, destroying your purchasing power. The naira in your hand is good as you're getting worthless every day. But Rotus, let me come back. I'll talk about that chart you put up. Do not compare Nigeria with Angola.
You can see the growth. We're doing better though, as far as the World Bank's forecast.
Don't compare Nigeria with Angola. And I'll tell you why. Angola gets proceeds from oil just like us. We're seeing what they're doing with their oil money.
Paying down debt.
Inflation is 7% in Angola. The kwacha is one of the best performing currencies in the African. Guess what he gained against the dollar?
10%.
Not 10%.
It was 10 last year.
23% now.
Year to date?
Yes.
Okay, well last year was about 10. So double digit either way.
Double digit against the dollar. And it keeps gaining and it keeps doing well. Are we not an oil producing economy?
We are.
But because of oil theft, we've creamed away our wealth. Now we act brand new every time like we don't know what is going on. Now we're beginning to find our way back up. 1.2 million barrels per day, good. We've not still hit the OPEC quota. Don't compare us with South Africa. South Africa has a lot of its problem. But we can see the mining sector, what it's doing for South Africa. We have that potential too in mining here that we have not harnessed. So when you look at it, the economic rebound South Africa is having is because of the mining sector. Look at other countries in the world, they are doing well. Saudi Arabia, from the proceeds of this Ukraine war, wants to build a new city.
That's true.
This is the first time wars don't favor Nigeria. I keep talking about Yom Kippur War favored Nigeria. Gulf War in 92 favored Nigeria. You remember that's when we set up DIFRI?
That's correct.
To start doing infrastructure and all of that. That was when we started up PTF. So we see that we're falling through the cracks. And as for South Africa and ESCOM, it just shows what bad management can do. Do you know at a point, ESCOM was a poster child for everything good managerially in a company? It was so good that they were, as of 1994, producing little as much power, or even, I think, more than, I don't have that fact empirically, I read it somewhere in The Economist, and they were producing as much or closer to the number of power that South Korea was churning out. But all of a sudden, ESCOM went down the drain. And that's to show you what bad management does. And Nigeria has now become a poster child of what bad management does to a country.
True. Got to turn it around.
Well, thanks, Rotus. Just to go to the World Bank, the federal government of Nigeria in recent times haven't been very happy with World Bank projections, and for obvious reasons. Now, during the budget defense and presentation, the Minister of Finance, Ms. Zainab Ahmed, had said that the projections of GDP growth rates on which the budget was hinged is 3.75%. World Bank is saying it's 2.9%. IMF said it was 3% for 2023. What's the implication of this on our budget and the financing of the budget?
If you don't grow enough and you don't grow your revenues, you heard Ira Teriba now saying that the revenue projections are incredibly optimistic. The implications are if you do not grow enough, then your revenues are not going to grow enough, and you're not going to be able to finance your budget. So
it means that the budget is not. We have a revenue problem with this budget.
Big revenue problem.
Already, in terms of the deficit, there's a huge deficit. To talk about borrowing plans to fund the budget, and now even the parameters on which it's hinged is not quite accurate. Well, Nigeria, there you go. We look forward to
next month votes. Everybody. By the way, PVC collections they've started, right?
Yes. So they're about to close. We're ending it on the 22nd.
Exactly. So go collect yours and pick them up and all that good stuff. And
I don't envy the next administration, the next government. You have a tough work on your hands with regards to the economy. Well, thank you very much,
Thank
Rotus.
you so much. Thank you so much.